speaking, I was saying to myself, many times as Christians, we don't know that every time we're moving through life, we're moving through realms. And so we see the story in Genesis 28, where Jacob is making a journey. And he's making a journey to his uncle's house, Laban. But he comes through this place. The Bible says that night he laid his head, he slept. He woke up the next day and he began to declare that God was here and I did not know it. Now, that was a positive encounter that Jacob had. But do you know that that's the same way that we go through places and deities are there and we did not know it? Satanic altars are there and we did not know it. And what exactly was that altar that was speaking? It was an altar that Abraham had erected 2 generations before. And so every time people set up altars and people set up places of agreements, they become markers in the spirit realm. People die, but the spirits that they serve never die. And so these spirits are consistently in key places and locations. Now, if we're going to talk about the soul and the sensitivity of the soul and the vulnerability of the soul, you need to understand how certain things interact with the soul. One of the first things that I want to talk about is like an altar-to-altar interaction. And it's one of the things that God told me about. And I said, Lord, why does my husband have the ability to maybe provoke me in a certain manner that other people don't? And the Lord said to me, it's not about your husband and it's not about the you that you know. Because every time 2 people get married, it's not individuals that marry, it's altars that marry. It's covenants that marry. And so the Lord said to me that there are certain interactions that happen in the realm of the spirit. It's the same way that if you put maybe certain elements in a room, and I'm talking about scientifically, some may cause an explosion and a reaction, and some will not. In the same way, in the spirit realm, there are certain configurations of certain people's spiritual dealings from the past and your spiritual dealing and your journey, that the moment they come together, it has the capacity to create a spark of fire, and some don't. He said to me, I set both of you up for a purpose, but you have to understand that the enemy also has history. And so within the file that Satan has, he also knows that if these 2 people get married, there are certain unhealed things on the inside of him and things he hasn't dealt with spiritually and things she hasn't dealt with spiritually. And when these 2 things meet, it will always cause a fire. And so God began to say to me that don't argue anymore. You people don't have a physical problem. You have a spiritual problem. So you have to go deal with the spirits that are managing those altars that were handed down to you in your bloodlines. But you also have to uproot the places of worship in your soul, because it's the soul that can be lifted up to an idol, according to Psalm 24. And he says, as long as you have not dealt with it, you are allowing it to remain in you as an idol. So I am owning it and thinking, this is my position. And every time we fight, I'm telling him, this is what I think. But it is not I really thinking it. It was programmed into me, delivered to me as culture. And I have received it as a position that is not wrestling against my husband. And so God had to say to me, you need to learn to deal with it, because this is a vulnerability in your soul. And as long as he is who he is, it will continue to cause a fire. Now, that being said, another thing that can also expose the soul is locations. And I thank God you spoke about the Buddha statue. There's this story in the Bible about Naomi and Ruth, and how Naomi left Bethlehem and went down to a Moabite city, and she lost her husband, she lost her sons. We tell this story, but when you think about it spiritually, you realize that there are certain locations that have the capacity to trigger inner weaknesses on the inside of you. And so when you become a person that God sends on assignment and you have to travel location to location, one of the first things you begin to realize is how certain locations affect you. And you step into certain locations, you deal with depression. You step into certain locations, you can actually begin to struggle with lust. And I found that many Christians do not embrace spiritual intelligence enough to understand that your soul is vulnerable to location's configuration. So when you enter a location like Naomi and her husband and children did, something was in that location that had the capacity to take them out. That when they were in Bethlehem, they were safe. But when they came into that location, they became vulnerable. And so your soul is usually vulnerable to the things that have been erected in certain locations that you are unaware of. Now, that being said, you then begin to see her response afterwards. What did she start to say? She said, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, call me bitterness. She began to profess a new disposition of heart, a new disposition of spirit and personality. Now, Satan was not done with that bloodline just yet, because he knew that there was a capacity for Ruth to become the wife of Boaz and then to become a woman in the lineage of Jesus. So he was determined to take them out completely. So her professing to be bitterness became a gateway that could have kept them in Moab, so that forever and ever a generation and a bloodline that could have been passed down to bring forth Jesus would have been corrupted and would have been cut short from actually fulfilling its purpose. Now, so you then realize that locations play a role, words play a role, the altars that were erected play a role. For you to be a safe and a secure Christian, you must understand that everything is consistently speaking. And so you must always be speaking. You can never win the battle of life in silence. Never. And the Bible says, let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich. These days, we call it olden days Christianity. When if Pastor Stephanie is saying, like, how you do? I'm like, blessed and highly favored. The hand of the Lord is upon my life. Ooh, bouncing in the Lord. They are like, please, all this, these are old-time Christians. But guess what? They knew something that we are failing at today. Because the Bible says, let the weak say, it didn't say, let the weak say I am weak. Today we celebrate things that we call openness, vulnerability, truth. Oh, sister, I thank you for how plain you are, the way you open up to us. Don't open your demons to me. I don't appreciate it. Do you get? So today we celebrate people talking about how I have this sickness, how I'm struggling with this addiction. Why are we celebrating the confession of troubles and we no longer appreciate the declaration of victory? So when people say, oh, I'm struggling with this, you love them, 100,000 followers, because the person is telling you 100 days through anxiety. How about the pastor that is sitting there or the believer and telling you, you don't have to be anxious. You can fight that demon. You can fight that spirit. Make these declarations with me. We are not celebrating declarations of victory. We are celebrating proclamations of brokenness. That in itself is a lie in this generation's culture. And it's part of the things that is weakening the souls of men. Another thing that, can leave our souls vulnerable is when we are not willing to make the effort in righteousness. And I found out that one of the problems we have that can corrupt our soul is our addiction to power, but our lack of discipline in acquiring the power we desire. So you find out that many people want to enter the heights of the Spirit, but they do not want to labor in the valleys that take you there. So when you are that kind of Christian, it can expose you to divination. And because divination is the back door to the spirit realm. And the moment you are exposed to divination, anything can infiltrate your soul. You look at the story of Lot and his daughters. The Lord came to deliver them from Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible says concerning Lot, that Lot, while he was there, he vexed his righteous soul daily. So the little righteousness that was left in Lot was consistently vexed. But he never took his bag and left. Many of us as Christians, we are vexing our righteous souls daily. You are sitting in situations that do not stir up righteousness in you. You are sitting in places, friendships and relationships that consistently corrupt the holiness on the inside of you. So your soul is being vexed consistently. The problem with remaining in situations like that is that you are not only exposing yourself, but your generation. By the time the angel came to deliver them, the angel said to them, go to the mountains. But they said, oh, no. Lot said, let me go to this city. Lot is doing the same thing again, judging from the weakness of his soul what his next step should be. He was using his eyes to say, I'd rather do city than do mountain. Mountain is the place of consecration, is the place of encounter, is the place where God asks you for your Isaac. And he's like, no, I'm not going to the mountain. Let me go to the easy place and go and join people again. But what he does not know is that word for city is the word polis, which also means warfare. So every time you have a struggle in your soul, part of what Satan does is that he makes you gravitate towards the warfare that can come out of your struggle as opposed to going to the mountain. Lot was not willing to make the sacrifice of ascending the mountain, going into the place where righteousness could override brokenness. Rather, I would rather go be with people, hide it again, and act as though I don't know that God literally just destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, if you are not willing to make the needed journey, you will see it play out in your future generation. His daughters were virgins, but their souls were not virgins. Because by the time they went to that place, look at what they did to their father. They slept. These were girls that he said, let me give you my virgin daughters. So outward morality does not equate to spiritual rightness or righteousness before God. So they had not slept with men, but they had the spirit of violation on the inside of them. Where did it come from? A father who did not know how to bring government and governance around the soul. A father who pitched his tent outside of Sodom, and the next time you see him, he's in Sodom. A father that did not know how to draw the boundary lines of preservation within the places of emotion. He allowed his eyes to be subject to harlotry and homosexuality in Sodom. And so it became the natural disposition of his daughters to celebrate brokenness. Eventually, they violated him and they gave birth to Moab, and they gave birth to cities that could not have an inheritance in God. Every time you joke around with your consecration and the boundaries that preserve your soul, you are exposing future generations to brokenness and disqualification.
Wow. You know, I think a good place, with every conversation, there was something in particular that